The stranger arrived at dawn. No horse, no cart, just a long coat stained by the road and a satchel slung over his shoulder like it weighed more than it should. He moved quietly, like someone used to slipping through places without drawing attention. Even though he was hard to miss. Tall, strong. Not the kind that swaggered, but the kind you noticed. Sharp jaw, knuckles calloused, black hair tied back. His eyes were calm. Too calm. People watched him pass, curious. Suspicious. The town didn't get visitors like him. Not ones who asked for nothing. He stopped at the well first. Drank. Then he asked the old woman nearby if she needed help carrying her basket. She said no, then yes. By midday, he'd cleaned and stitched a wound for a crying boy, set a broken rib for a farmhand who'd fallen from a roof, and cured a fever that had been killing the blacksmith's wife. All for free. That's when the talking started. Some called him a priest, a wanderer, a mage, a fraud. The healings were too fast, too clean, and he never cast a single spell loud enough for anyone to hear. Just placed his hand on you and whispered. Even the mayor came to see him. "Where'd you study, son?" "I didn't," he said. "You're a healer?" "I help people." "Name?" He looked away. "Dan." It was a lie. Everyone could tell, but no one pressed except the ones who couldn't stand him. By sundown, a few of the local toughs had had enough. Too handsome, too quiet, too kind. That always made them nervous. They found him kneeling by a sick dog, murmuring something only the animal seemed to hear. The dog whimpered, then stilled. Its breathing smoothed out. That's when the first boot hit his ribs. "You playing hero, pretty boy?" Dan grunted, rolled onto his side, and blinked up at them. His expression didn't change. "You could just ask for help," he said. They laughed. One of them spit. He didn't fight back. Not when they dragged him up. Not when the punch split his lip. Not even when they threw his satchel into the dirt and kicked it open, books and tonics spilling across the ground like trash. "Not so high and mighty now, huh?" Dan stood slowly, picked up a flask with shaking fingers. Blood dripped down his chin. "I'll be leaving now." And he did. No one stopped him. But someone had been watching, and she did not leave. He didn't ask for company. So of course, she sat beside him. "Is that comfrey?" she asked, squinting into his satchel. Dan didn't look up from the splint he was binding. "It is. Mixed with elderroot?" His eyes flicked to her. She had soft cheeks, big eyes, and a smudge of something flour, maybe, on her chin. Mousy brown hair tied back with a strip of linen. Local, he figured. Baker's daughter or something like that. "Most people don't know that," he murmured. She smiled. "Most people aren't me." He blinked once, then went back to work. She showed up the next day, and the next. Sometimes she brought bread, or helped crush herbs, or just sat and watched him work. She asked questions, laughed easily, and didn't seem fazed by his silence. Or his scars, especially not the ones on his hands. Or the one that curved behind his ear like a blade had nearly taken his head clean off. Most people avoided looking at those. She didn't flinch, just passed him bandages and said, "You're better at this than half the royal physicians." "I doubt that," he said. She tilted her head. "I don't." The townsfolk noticed, especially the girls. First it was the merchant's daughter, then the innkeeper's niece. A quiet wave of curiosity followed him everywhere he went. Baskets of fruit, half-lidded smiles, excuses to stop by. It wasn't just his face. It was the way he listened. The way he never rushed, never joked, never asked for anything. He was gentle and strong. That was dangerous. Still, the mousy-haired girl came every day, sat closer, stayed longer. He never asked her name, but he remembered her voice. "Why don't you fight back?" she asked one afternoon. He was cleaning a bloodied rag from a brawl the night before, one he hadn't started and hadn't finished. He didn't answer. She didn't push. He liked that. By the end of the week, the whispers turned sharper. Who's she to think she's special? Probably some bastard noble's brat. Can't trust a girl who shows up smelling like rosewater. They didn't know the half of it, and they had no idea what was coming. They brought them in by cart, 2 carts actually, pulled by oxen, driven slow, guarded by a dozen city watchmen with faces drawn tight. Word spread fast in towns like this, faster than plague, faster than fire. Dan had been treating a sprained wrist when he saw them come through the main gate. 10 men and women, bandaged. One of them, barely recognizable beneath the swelling, had lost both legs, blackened to the thigh. They were miners, someone whispered. Collapsed tunnel, caught in a mana surge from the old crystal vein. They should have died, and maybe they still would. But the mayor was desperate. Desperate people turned to quiet strangers with quiet hands. Dan didn't volunteer. He motioned for them to approach. They obeyed. They brought the first man to him, and then the second, and then the rest. He worked in the courtyard behind the chapel, sun high, heat baking the stones. A ring of spectators formed first, townsfolk, then merchants, then passing soldiers and nobility drawn in by the quiet gravity of the moment. He moved fast, focused, not frantic. His coat was gone, sleeves rolled to the elbows, scarred hands slick with blood and balm, glowing faintly from the inside. Not once did he draw a circle or recite an incantation. He whispered. His hands glowed with power. And things simply changed. Bones realigned beneath torn flesh. Arteries wove back together. Veins that should have clotted pulsed with life again and were cleansed. The man with no legs gasped as muscle fiber, his muscle, grew back and began to knit like rope over stumps of bone. Gasps turned to shouts. And still Dan worked. He laid hands on 10 people over the next hour. 10 mangled bodies, 10 lost causes. By the time he stood, the courtyard reeked of blood, sweat, ash, and something older, something holy. And not a single patient remained broken. It was a miracle. One the people didn't fully understand. She had watched it all. Lady Marilyn Vey, hair like ivory silk, lips untouched by sun. Carriage parked beneath the shade of the linden trees. Her guards cleared space. Her maid fanned her, and her eyes never left Dan. Not once. Her heart was still hammering from the moment the legless man sat up. "This one," she said softly. "Who is he?" A guard hesitated. "Milady, he's no one. A healer." "No," she whispered. "He's power. And no one told me power looked like that. He didn't act like someone who had just performed a miracle." That's what made people nervous. After healing 10 broken bodies in a single afternoon, Dan simply wiped his hands, collected his satchel, and disappeared as if it were just another Tuesday. No bow, no proclamation, no thanks expected or needed. He was back the next day, brewing fever balm, soothing children. Quiet, focused. I was already there, pretending to organize dried roots even though I'd done that the night before. I wasn't the only one. Lady Marilyn Vey had returned. She didn't speak to him at first, just sat nearby, under a silk canopy her servants had erected like she was attending an opera. Hair perfect, dressed too fine for dust and herbs. Her presence turned heads. Her silence snapped necks. The first time she addressed him, her voice was soft and sweet as clover honey. "You healed all those people, but you're still here?" Dan didn't glance up. He stood again, brushing his hands clean on his trousers. "I should get back," he said. "To work? To peace." She watched him walk up the slope toward the chapel path, his coat flapping lightly at his heels, sunlight crowning his dark hair like an unspoken prayer. She pressed her fingers to her lips, just for a second. Then she turned back toward town and didn't see the shadow under the trees. Didn't see Lady Vey's personal guard watching. Didn't hear the whisper sent back to the manor, "The girl's in the way." Lady Vey didn't stop coming around. If anything, she came more often, always dressed like she expected to be painted, even in the dust and summer heat silk sleeves, jeweled brooches, soft gloves that never once touched anything dirty. She brought tea once, served cold in glass cups with lemon slices so thin you could see through them. She offered one to Dan. He thanked her, took it, and handed it to the blacksmith's apprentice with the cracked ribs. The next day she brought wine. Dan didn't drink. She smiled too widely and sat beside him anyway. The brown-haired girl didn't try to compete. She brought soup, bread, old linens she cut into bandages. She washed her hands in the same basin as Dan and carried crates when he overworked his shoulder. She didn't ask for attention, didn't demand his gaze. But sometimes when they sat beneath the tree behind the chapel and she handed him a cup of spring water, their fingers brushed and neither pulled away. They talked more now. Not much, just enough. Once she caught him looking at her when she wasn't speaking, just watching the way her brow furrowed as she folded cloth. He looked away first. Lord Callis came around too. Always lingering, always pretending he was just passing through, that his presence wasn't a storm waiting to happen. The townsfolk avoided him now. He looked at them the way nobles looked at stray dogs, tolerant until provoked. He spoke only to Lady Vey, and sometimes to Dan. When he did, it was short, snide. "You're not from here, are you?" Dan didn't look up. "Neither are you." Or, "Still playing priest, healer? I'm just helping." "Strange how you help the right people." "Is there wrong people to help?" Dan's hands never stopped moving, but the girl could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. Rumors spread like heat in summer. They said Lady Vey had been rejected, that Dan was in love with the healer girl, the quiet one, the nobody, that Lord Callis had been humiliated. Someone found a bird nailed to the chapel door one morning, a message. No one could read it, written in an old dialect, runic and dark. Dan burned it without speaking. One afternoon, when the girl brought herbs wrapped in wax paper, she found Dan sitting outside the chapel's back door with his coat off, sleeves rolled high, the sunlight catching every line of scar across his forearms. He looked up, smiled, just slightly. "Thanks." She sat beside him, closer than usual. The space between their knees wasn't quite polite anymore. She handed him the herbs. "Lady Vey tried to offer your services to her father's estate today. She said you could be useful at court." Dan tied the packet carefully. "That's generous of her. She wasn't joking." "I know." The girl studied his profile. "You're not going, are you?" "No. Why?" His hands paused. "I don't want to be owned." He looked at her then, and something passed between them. Not loud, not romantic, just a quiet acknowledgement of a door neither of them had opened yet, but both could see. She swallowed. "Do you ever regret healing the way you do?" "No." He glanced down. "But sometimes I regret who I heal in front of." The silence after that stretched long and soft. Birds chirped somewhere overhead. A wind rustled the chapel's ivy-covered wall. Then footsteps. Heavy. Lord Callis appeared at the corner, 2 guards flanking him. He didn't look at the girl, only at Dan. "Walk with me." Dan didn't move. "I'm working." Callis gave a short laugh. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Dan stood. The girl stood with him. "I said walk, not bring your maid." The girl's fists clenched. Dan's didn't. "She isn't going anywhere," he said. Callis took a step forward. "Listen to me, you dirt-stained peasant. I don't care what tricks you use or how many broken legs you glue together. Lady Vey is mine. I've been patient. I've been polite." Dan tilted his head. "Calm. Still." "If you're worried about her affections," he said, just loud enough. "You shouldn't be." The girl froze. He'd said it again. Callis snarled. "You arrogant." He lunged, hand at his side, maybe for a dagger, maybe not. But Dan caught his wrist before it got halfway. He didn't twist, didn't yank, just held it. And something changed in Callis's face, like he'd just realized what he was touching. Dan's voice was quiet. "This is your last warning." He let go. Callis stumbled back, face pale, breath caught. He looked at the girl, then at Dan, and spat on the ground. "You'll regret this." They didn't speak after he left. Not for a long while. Dan sat back down. So did she. Finally, She whispered, "Did you mean it?" He glanced at her. "Mean what?" "That he shouldn't be worried." Dan looked down, then said nothing. Which, in its own way, said everything. The air was still smoking when they arrived. Lady Maravine Vey rode in first alone this time. No guards. Her fine silks were covered by a riding cloak, eyes shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Her horse clattered to a halt at the edge of the ruined village square. She dismounted with purpose. Chin high, hands gloved, she'd come to claim him. Lord Callus arrived not long after, dressed in black, flanked by 5 men with dead eyes and quiet swords. His jaw was tight. His hand rested too evilly on the hilt at his hip. He said nothing as he dismounted. He'd come to end him. Neither of them expected her. A girl stood in the center of the destruction, barefoot, soot streaked across her cheeks, her simple dress torn at the hem. She held Dan's unconscious body in her lap, cradling his head as if nothing else in the world existed. But she looked up when they approached, slowly, deliberately, and stood. Something was wrong. She didn't flinch when the wind caught her hair, only it wasn't brown anymore. It was shifting, darkening, unfurling like ink spilled in water. By the time she took her second step, it was long, too long, trailing behind her like living shadow. By her third step, her frame had changed, taller now, stronger, hips wider, posture coiled with something otherworldly. Her dress clung tighter where curves hadn't existed minutes before. And her eyes, they weren't brown anymore. They burned red. They took a step back, breath catching. What? Callus narrowed his eyes. Illusion magic, some trick. But when she stepped fully into the light, they both saw her clearly. The girl, no, the woman now stood straight-backed, face still and eerily calm. That soft innocence was gone. In its place was something regal, cold. Divine. She raised one hand. The ground beneath the attackers' corpses shifted. Shadows peeled away from the alley walls. Red-eyed figures, humanoid but wrong, shaped from mist and glass and rage, stepped from the smoke and dropped to one knee around her. Minions! Her voice was still hers, but deeper. Older. Like echoes behind silk. You came to take him, she said to Vey, without looking. You brought vanity. Then her gaze cut to Callus. You came to kill him. You brought death. Callus drew his sword. She didn't move. Her minions did. One leapt forward, like a shadow, unchained. Another followed. Then another. The first of Callus's men didn't scream long. Steel clashed with nothing missed. Then there was blood. Then silence. Callus backed up, slashing blindly. What are you? She didn't answer. She walked. Every step she took cracked the ground beneath her feet. Dust lifted in gentle clouds. Her hair shimmered in waves of violet. Her eyes didn't blink. Callus lunged, then froze mid-step, blade trembling in his hand. She had lifted one finger, and every ounce of violence in his body drained from him like water. He dropped his weapon, fell to his knees, and began to cry. Vey was already retreating, stumbling back toward her horse. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't. He's just a healer. He's just a man. The woman turned her head slightly. That's all he ever wanted to be. She paused. You didn't let him. Her limbs wouldn't obey. The red-eyed woman moved past her without another glance. You're not worth killing, she said softly. But you will remember what power actually looks like. The village square was quiet again. The attackers were dead or gone. The smoke was clearing. She knelt beside Dan once more, placed a hand over his chest. Her hair was already darkening. Her eyes softening. The glow faded. And in its place, the brown-haired girl sat again, small, quiet, trembling now that it was over. Her hands pressed against his chest, her forehead resting gently against his. Wake up, she whispered. Dan stirred. His eyes fluttered open, glassy at first. What happened? She smiled through tears. You saved everyone. His hand found hers. I wasn't alone, he whispered. Then he passed out again, but this time it was peaceful. They didn't speak of it afterward, not directly. The town rebuilt. People came to offer thanks. Some called Dan a god, some called the girl a witch. Neither answered. Lady Vey left the province that night, face white, lips drawn. She never returned. Lord Callis was found 3 days later, wandering the road barefoot, his voice gone, his eyes vacant. Dan recovered. Slowly. And when he finally stood again under the chapel tree, the girl was there, her hair neatly braided, her eyes soft and ordinary. He touched her face. You don't have to pretend with me, he said. She looked up. I wasn't pretending, she said. I was forgetting. He nodded. Do you still want peace? She asked. I want you. She took his hand, slipped it into hers. And for the first time, neither of them looked away.